What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so getting back into the Thanos solo series, Jeff Lemire as a writer is crazy. This has proven to be like one of the coolest series that's out there. The Thanos solo series, in a lot of ways, really kind of wraps up these loose ends that were sort of left hanging by Jonathan Hickman and Avengers: The New Avengers going into Secret Wars, in the sense that it basically wrapped up the character of Thane. Now, Thane, in a lot of ways, was just sort of introduced in Marvel Comics by Jonathan Hickman, and we'll talk about that as we go through our run on Avengers and New Avengers, but he was brought in as a reason for Thanos to invade Earth. He was basically looking for his son. Now, it led to a great big huge conflict, different things like that, and Thane himself continued on as a character who was just sort of in the background and was there. The problem is that Marvel never really knew what to do with him. Now, again, as far as we're aware, this all should have been wrapped up in Secret Wars, because that story basically sets the stage for just a line-wide reboot. The issue is that, from a lot of speculation, Marvel kind of got cold feet, and the result is that they backed off the idea of a reboot and just kind of continued on. And so what it did is it took all these plot threads that should have been wrapped up in Secret Wars, and it just kind of left them lingering. So really, it was just all these different concepts that were just sort of there. For the character of Thane, what Jeff Lemire did was actually really, really cool. Because Thane was the son of Thanos, and because he was sort of, living among the Inhumans, what we ended up finding out was that Thane was basically being manipulated by Mistress Death. And again, Mistress Death has a long standing in Marvel Comics for a variety of reasons. One, because she is the tried and true version of Death, but her manipulations behind the scenes with regards to Thanos, and Thanos constantly chasing after her affections, has been a long-standing part of his publication history. I'd go so far as to say it's a cornerstone of the Thanos character. With Mistress Death chasing after the son of Thanos, basically going after Thane, what this did is it set in motion the idea that Thane basically sought after the Phoenix Force. And so what this meant is that he basically took the Phoenix Egg, which is to say this sort of representation of what the Phoenix Force will become, absorbing that energy unto himself and becoming the new avatar for the Phoenix. And what that means is that he has nigh omnipotent power. And one of the first ways in which he demonstrated this power was stripping Thanos of all the abilities he had, and even his immortality, and making him mortal and virtually powerless. And so that's where this picks up, where Thanos is basically cast back to Titan. He was sent back to his home planet with no real power unto himself. It's him basically fighting for survival. And that's the cool thing here. And this is what I love so much about the character of Thanos. Under normal circumstances, when you have a character in comics who has all these different powers and all these different abilities, and they're basically all stripped away, usually it's kind of like, oh man, what am I going to do now? And they just kind of give up, and they're just kind of moping around, and they're just kind of like, whatever. With Thanos, it's not that way. Thanos was a madman, and he was a Titan in every ounce of the word. From the time he was a kid till he first lost his powers here, he's always had a strong understanding of who he is and what he was about. A lot of that was the result of experimentation, but this is designed to say Thanos has no powers, Thanos is mortal, but it doesn't mean that Thanos is a weakling. He's just as dangerous as he ever was, because despite the fact that Thane took away everything that makes Thanos who he is in terms of powers and immortality, the one thing he couldn't take away is Thanos' mind, his ingenuity, the fact that he's one of the smartest people out there in the Marvel universe. But it's also designed to sort of humanize Thanos a little bit, because where he's ready to deal with some of the most capable people who are out there and overcome almost any challenge he can face, when it goes to doing something like creating fire, it's difficult for him to pull off. He's not able to do it readily, and it's almost kind of crushing for him, because now he has to deal with the harsh realities of the cold. It's basically rebuilding him again. It's all rooted in the idea that Thanos is doing the best he can, trying to keep himself going. Now, of course, this also coincides with the arrival of Star Fox, Nebula, and the Champion of the Universe. Now, when it comes to these characters, they have all played pretty significant roles throughout their time. And this is something that I want to clarify when it comes to the Infinity Stones. One of the things that I've seen recently when people were talking about the Infinity Stones, I saw it on like the Marvel Studios subreddit, and I saw it on, the main Reddit page, different things like that. People were talking about the Power Stone, and we'll connect these dots here in a second, so I'm not going off on a tangent for no reason. But people talk about the Power Stone, and they say the Power Stone is basically this thing that, makes people physically stronger. That's not true. The Power Stone amplifies whatever power people have. In the case of Champion of the Universe, he was a character that resided on physical strength, and so the Power Stone amplified his physical strength. If you gave the Power Stone to Charles Xavier, it would amplify his telepathy. If you gave it to Franklin Richards, it would amplify his reality warping powers. It amplifies the existing powers of whoever's possessing it. That's why it's so important when it comes to the Infinity Infinity Gauntlet, because each of the Infinity Stones outside of the Power Stone have abilities. The Soul Stone basically allows you to sort of analyze and capture the souls of people. Mind Stone allows you to, expand the mind and control, dominate the minds of others, read the mind of others. What the Power Stone does is it comes along and amps up all the powers of those stones, and then basically allows itself to function as a bedrock, meaning because it's an infinite source of power, the stones can in turn draw on the Power Stone and never run out of energy. So that's really kind of how that works. But in Thanos' quest, the big moment, really one of the biggest moments of the champion of the universe, is that he basically gained the Power Stone. And what it did is it set him on this crusade of basically, trying to find a challenger. Of course, Thanos showed up, tricked him out of the Power Stone, but that was the whole idea of the champion of the universe. That's really where he comes from. For the character of Star Fox, he is basically the brother of Thanos. The next one of these, of course, is Nebula. Now, Nebula was interesting because for years she masqueraded as the daughter or granddaughter of Thanos, only for him to basically find out she was lying. That's why if you go and you read the Infinity Gauntlet story, she's all twisted and screwed up and weird looking because Thanos had basically warped her mind using the Infinity Gauntlet in addition to other forms of torture and so on. Now, of course, that leads into the conclusion of the Infinity Gauntlet and most likely the conclusion of the Infinity War storyline in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's still interesting. These guys have all in some form or fashion dealt with Thanos, and in a lot of ways, they hate Thanos. With them having basically been shanghaied and tricked by Thane into helping him gain the Phoenix Force and then in turn abandoned, they now turn to Thanos as a way to basically stop his son. Now keep in mind, each of these characters are people who have explored the universe in a variety of ways. So I mean, they're well aware of the threat that Thane poses in possession of the Phoenix Force. Thanos, of course, having battled his own son and lost his powers in the process, they basically come together because they have to. Now, when the question is asked what they should do, what the answer should be, Thanos immediately says, we have to chart a course to the furthest reaches of the universe. We have to go as far out as we possibly can. And the reason for this is because what they're doing is they're tracking down something called the God Quarry. Now, this is one of the other reasons why I love Jeff Lemire's writing so much, is because when it comes to things like the God Quarry, he basically makes this up. The God Quarry exists at the furthest reaches of the universe, and the only way to access it is to actually travel through a gravity well. The whole idea here is that arriving here at the God Quarry, this is basically where gods go to die. And it's really, really cool because we've seen this done in a variety of different ways in Marvel Comics. For example, if we reference Jason Aaron's Thor God of Thunder, we learn about Gore the God Butcher, and we learn about like the Congress of Worlds, and we learn about things like this massive pantheon of gods, in the sense that within the Marvel Universe, there's all kinds of gods out there. What this does is it builds on that, and it says there's actually a place where gods go to die, and they'll go there for any number of reasons. They'll go there because of the fact that people don't worship them anymore. They'll go there because they just kind of evolved to a new state. Whatever the case is, when they come to the God Quarry, it's basically a test of sorts. These three witches, this coven, has supposedly existed before anything else, before any other god existed. But this whole idea, this trial of the God Quarry, is that if a person goes into the quarry, they essentially undergo a trial. And what this trial means is that they will begin the process of basically experiencing kind of an illusion of sorts, this quote unquote nightmare, so to speak, depending on what it is that they're doing. If they're strong in self, if they know who they are, then they'll immediately just walk out unscathed and basically receive the power of the God Quarry. If they fail, they're confined to the God Quarry forever. And that's what you see with all these different statues frozen in place. These are gods who failed the test, and basically their souls are fed upon by this coven. Now, one other thing to keep in mind here is that Thane is still kind of in the background. He's still being manipulated by Mistress Death, and it's basically this idea that because she's a cosmic entity and because she has cosmic awareness on everything that's going on, her response is, your father is trying to make his return. You have to go there. You have to stop him. You have to kill Thanos and take his place and stand at my side and that kind of thing. Basically the same manipulations and the same form of ensnaring that we saw her pull when it came to Thanos himself. Now, with Thanos submitting himself to the God Quarry, he immediately begins a process of undergoing this trial, so to speak. And what this does is it basically shows us that Thanos essentially experiences this kind of scenario where he fights alongside the Avengers. And that's what's so cool here, is because we're not given this transition. He's just there. He's just fighting alongside the Avengers. He's leading the Avengers team. Vision, Iron Man, Miss Marvel, Daredevil, he's there fighting alongside all of them. One of the things to keep in mind is that with Thanos, he's well aware of Earth. He knows about all the superheroes. It's interesting because as Thanos goes through this, he realizes something isn't right here. This is not how things are supposed to be. That none of this is real. When the scenario is presented in terms of the foes that Thanos has faced, the people that he's defeated over the years, we see things like Adam Warlock. There's the image of Thanos getting the Infinity Gauntlet. This basically just sort of asks the question, what would happen if Thanos became a good guy? Ultimately, he says, this isn't right. None of this is real. And he basically regains his bearings, realizing he's Thanos. He's just as villainous as he ever was. But his powers begin to sort of emerge here as he's going through this illusion. And what this means is he's receiving the power of the God Quarry. Now, because of the fact that this is so ambiguous in terms of what the power of the god Kori is, what this seems to indicate is that all of Thanos' power returns to him. He gets all his powers back the way he was before, presumably even before the events of Secret Wars. So it's basically classic Thanos with all the powers of classic Thanos. What this means, for those of you guys who are not familiar with this character, it means Thanos is godly now. It means he's crazy powerful. So of course, what this means is that with Thane having shown up in this realm of the Coven with the intention of facing off against his father, it's amazing because it's essentially Thane with the Phoenix Force fighting against classic Thanos. And this is classic Marvel storytelling. That's what this is, and that's why this is so cool. If you go and you read the old Thanos comics for the most part, that's the kind of thing you saw. But the long and short in terms of what we're given here and what we're being shown here is that Thanos is easily able to stand against the entirety of the Phoenix Force. And for a lot of classic Marvel readers, this is going to raise some eyebrows. And to a degree, they're kind of right. I mean, when it comes to the Phoenix Force, you got to remember the Phoenix Force's power is almost infinite. As long as the multiverse exists, as long as like the Marvel universe exists, essentially the Phoenix Force will always exist and it'll always be nigh omnipotent. And that's kind of the funny thing here is because classic Thanos was extremely capable in terms of his power. And so while it is kind of difficult to grasp, this is one of those scenarios of an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. But the reason why Thanos ends up coming out on top of this is because his son is inexperienced. And that's really what's being hit on here. Thanos has wrestled with absolute power on a multitude of occasions. The first time he got the Infinity Stones, he turned them into one giant stone and tried to blink out all the stars in the universe. The second time he got the Infinity Stones, he basically had the Infinity Gauntlet. He's had the Cosmic Cube. If you believe that Marvel The End is in continuity, which technically it's not, he's had the Heart of the Universe, basically the power of the one above all. He's fought Galactus to a standstill. I mean, he's routinely had absolute power. He's routinely been one of these guys who has gained just these insane levels of power. And so having done that time and time again, he's become the wiser because of it. He's learned his limitations. Thane is basically a young kid who has no idea the power he possesses in the form of the Phoenix Force or how to even use it. Because of the fact that he's so inexperienced, with all this power that he has, which could easily be translated into any form of reality warping if you push it to the extreme limits, instead, all the Phoenix Force becomes for him is a way to just make himself physically stronger and punch harder. It's just a very basic premise, a very basic way of fighting. And so where the two of them end up engaging in their own battle, this of course leads directly into the god Kori. And so of course what Thanos does in facing off against his son is basically begin to bring up all these different points. Not only that, because of the fact that he'd basically captured the Phoenix Force unwillingly, the Phoenix Force effectively abandons him. The Coven comes along and simply says the Phoenix Force is not supposed to be here. The Phoenix Force has no business here. And they in turn banish it from the god Kori. Now I want you to think about that for a second. You're talking about a cosmic entity. Not only that, the Phoenix Force is omniversal. What that means is there's only one Phoenix Force in the whole multiverse, and there's different avatars of the Phoenix Force in each universe. But you're basically talking about a multiversal entity being banished by the Coven from this one particular realm in the universe. That is an insane level of power. But of course, with the Phoenix Force basically abandoning Thane, it's Jeff Lemire's way of basically bringing things back down and simply saying, now we're going to find a way to end this story. What Thanos does is with his son not having the Phoenix Force, he just wrecks him in no time flat. Thanos, of course, takes his helmet back, which is kind of cool, and then simply says, you're going to spend time in the god Kori. I'm going to throw you down here. But it's cool because Thanos essentially says, look, I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I am the Mad Titan. None will equal me in terms of my intellect, power, so on and so forth. And he basically says, look, you're going to be subjected to the god Kori. You don't know who you are. You have no idea what you're about. And that's true. Thane doesn't. Thane lived among the Inhumans forever and ever and ever until Thanos shows up, and then he learns that Thanos is his father. But that's it. He never had a fatherly figure to teach him anything. Thane never understood his place in the universe. He's just been free floating in the universe since the day he was born, with no direction, no ambition, no drive for anything. And so as a result, when he's thrown into the god Kori, instead of being like Thanos, where he basically experiences this illusion of maybe Thanos really wanted to fight alongside the Avengers, Thane is going to experience nothing but just a litany of what amounts to a series of images in his mind with everything that he could be. It'll basically be this huge influx of every possibility just thrown into his mind because he doesn't know where he's going and he has no idea what he wants. And so it's cool because with him being thrown into the god Kori, he's effectively locked in there. Not only that, we end up having Mistress Death, who of course appeals to Thanos. Now remember, when it comes to the character of Mistress Death, it's just one of these things where she's just kind of going with whoever the biggest player in the field is. That's really it. It's not because she has to, it's because she wants to. Remember, we talked about that during the events of Secret Wars and the collapse of the multiverse. When it comes to Mistress Death, she represents death. Technically speaking, she cannot die. She'll just simply await everything that does die. Now, something else that I also want to point out here is the events of the Thanos Imperative, because inevitably inevitably people are going to bring that up. They're going to say, yeah, but Mistress Death died and Thanos imperative. That's true, but that was a different universe version of Mistress Death, and technically speaking, that should not have been allowed to happen. You should not be able to kill Death itself, but it has kind of happened on a couple of occasions, but they're fringe stories. So like Thanos imperative, for example, is a fringe story. The events of Secret Wars 2 were just so off the wall crazy. That story went off the rails so fast, but technically speaking, the Beyonder did kill Mistress Death and nobody could die. So, I mean, in my mind, Mistress Death should not be able to die. I guess it doesn't mean she can't, but in my mind, I really don't feel like she should be able to. But again, that's just kind of my opinion that I'm sort of throwing in here. But regardless of the circumstances, Thanos basically pushes her away and says, I have no need or want for your love. Now, keep in mind, this is something that's been building for a while. Because of the fact that Thanos was basically cursed with immortality and he was never allowed to properly die, during the events of Secret Wars, when Dr. Doom had quote unquote killed Thanos, instead, he was just kind of banished to the realm of nothingness, basically this space that exists outside of all time and space. There's nothing there. It's just a giant empty void outside of everything. When All New, All Different Marvel kicked off, Thanos basically found a way to break into the main Marvel universe, and then all the events have transpired accordingly. But the idea was that when Thanos was in nothingness, he basically fell in love with the idea of oblivion. He fell in love with the idea that there was nothing there, the cold, vast emptiness. Now, whether that's designed to basically bring in something like this entity that we never knew about, who's like Mistress Death, but represents all things that just don't exist, basically oblivion, we don't know if that's the case or not. We just simply know that Thanos has no interest in Mistress Death anymore. So it's kind of bringing back classic Thanos and then sort of tweaking it a bit. Now, of course, Mistress Death herself is vanished. Thanos just kind of takes off and leaves, champion of the universe and Star Fox and Nebula there, and that's really about it. But this story effectively ends on the fact that Thanos has returned. Thanos has come back. Classic, nigh omnipotent, wildly powerful Thanos. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.